let us continue our quest with the cards. Good deeds. Make the switch to organic produce whenever possible. I have a lot to say about this one. I became aware of organic things back in the year 2010-ish or so, because I knew somebody who had a grandma who was really into this stuff. It's the kind of older person who had standards for food, cooking everything, eating what they fish, things like that. And I thought, that reminds me a lot of my grandparents. They had their season when that's something they were doing. But then with age and certain disabilities, they had to begin their reliance on going to the store and shopping for that type of thing. And in my grandparents' case, they lived in a rather isolated area, meaning that it was truly a trip that had to be planned in advance for them to get their food. Now, an issue I was having is I guess I was beginning to misunderstand organics, because I looked at organics as inherently superior, and meaning that unless I eat everything organic, I am absolutely putting myself at risk no matter what. And I feel like that was leading me to develop an unhealthy perception about food. I was beginning to think that unless something is organic, I shouldn't eat it. And it's not that I developed an eating disorder. I couldn't have an eating disorder even if I tried, because my disorder is always going to be eating whenever I feel like it, whatever I feel like. That's why sometimes you'll see me balloon up and other times I'll retain my usual figure. But with organics, I was beginning to see any other food ever as inferior. And if I went out to eat, then I looked at it as this is going to be my organic cheat code. I was looking at milks and thinking, oh, I can buy organic milk. Organic is what it's going to be. But then the reality of my socioeconomic status hit me. And I remember telling myself, damn, since I'm poor, I'm gonna have to eat a mix of organic versus non-organic. And then I thought, well, how about if I eat the things that I think are most crucial to eat organic? That should help me get by. And so eventually I was beginning to be influenced by things like the Dirty Dozen, the so-called produce that you have to absolutely buy organic to make sure that they're not as bad for you. For instance, bananas. They don't have to be organic because they have the peel that you can just peel out, and that protects the product inside. That way you don't have to worry about it being too bad. But then when you go to the grocery store and you see that conventional bananas looking closer to what bananas look like in nature, which is that deformed looking crescent shape, whereas the organic ones have a little bit of a straighter appearance and they tend to be bigger, you can't help but be a little bit sus. And then potatoes, for instance, because they are roots, they are more susceptible to absorbing the pesticide, because when you spray this thing, it'll burrow onto the soil and it'll just somehow bind onto the potato. And even if you wash it and peel it and rinse it and boil it, whatever, the residue will linger there. Therefore, you're just eating this sponge of pesticide that as soon as you bite down on it, it'll just bleed out its contents and you'll ingest it. Is that healthy to think? Another thing I remember is old people always told me that apple trees produced apples that were really tiny. And that is true, for I met another friend who had grandparents with apple trees, and I visited their apple trees and I saw the product that they were yielding, and it was like cute borderline cherry looking apples. Those apples were nutrient dense enough back in the good old days that people only needed to eat one or maybe two to feel completely full and satisfied. But I looked at it as, well, the ones from the grocery store naturally have to be bigger so that there's enough food to go around for people and for people to get more value out of their money. But I just remember vividly thinking that eating clean, eating organic is just fucking expensive. And I think that it's a classist move, that I shouldn't be indirectly, subliminally influenced into feeling inferior just because my socioeconomic status deprives me from reaching for those things more often. Now, when it comes to organic food, taste wise, I can say that I feel the difference. And I feel like even when it comes to the longevity of the item and its overall effect in me, I don't know if this is psychological or if this is truly scientifically proven, but when I eat organic, I feel like I can taste it better. I feel like it revitalizes me a little better. I think I need less of organic products to make something work. Whereas if you have something that has too much artificial flavors, you feel like no matter how much you try to add that item into a recipe, it just doesn't hit the same. Whereas with organic, you just need like a little whisper of it to bring out the aroma or the potency on an item. I just feel a little bit weirded out that organic now is something that is so commonplace. You guys have heard me say multiple times on the channel, don't let what's sacred to become commonplace. I think that food needs to be as clean as possible. And with organics, it's not just about, well, this produce was grown without pesticides. Organics will still have a degree of pesticides and herbicides, and some that have been approved because we have collectively decided that they're not as bad for you as some others. But I also feel like organics can be a little bit misleading because it doesn't also talk about workers. Organic farming, from what I understand and could imagine, is one that's going to be a little bit more labor intense because you're not going to be relying on machinery quite as much. And to preserve organic integrity, it just feels like something that you really shouldn't rely on automation to perform for you. Now, the non-organic farms, of course, they can be bigger, supply more in a shorter amount of time. Therefore, they can get by foregoing being certified as organic, and they can profit a little quicker, and they will also naturally have more abundance of food to go around for everybody. Whereas with organics, I feel like not only does your farm need to be a little bit smaller, but because it needs to be a little bit smaller, your product yield is not going to be able to finance your business in a sustainable way short term, which there are some short term bills that you have to address. And the organic certification, for instance, is something that you have to pay for. And I guess for some of these farmers, it can be something pretty expensive. Organics, it's something that I want to consume more of and buy, but I don't like the emotional and mental manipulation that it can lead me to sometimes. It's like, oh, I have this apple in front of me. It doesn't have a organic label on it. It's inferior. I shouldn't eat it because it's going to be pesticide ridden. I don't think that that should be the attitude I have toward food. I think it's something like, this is an apple. It's something that is nutritious. I should just go for it. And organic food is supposed to be more nutrient dense. I'm guessing people have tested that. There's enough evidence to support it. I don't see why not. It makes sense. But I also think food is something that we're so disconnected from. I've never been to a farmer's market, anything like that, but I just think about the food that I get and how it may come from so far away that when you're alienated from your relationship with food and the relationship that people who produce it may have with it, and by extension with you, it's just something that becomes really hard overall to think about, as opposed to you actually needing to create a connection like my grandparents had to, which is you go to what's considered the downtown where everybody gathers, and you know that everybody is there for the same common reason, which is to supplement themselves with the foods that they need. You will learn the names of the people who live close by, the names of the people who are growing and producing your food. You know where your money is going to. But even I, as a modern consumer, even if I were to completely replace everything that I use with something organic, I'm still not going to know these people's names. I'm still not going to be able to just drive 5 to 10 minutes up to their headquarters or whatever to find out who they are, because everything now is done in such a massive scale that establishing a direct personal relationship with suppliers and vendors and stuff like that, you're usually not dealing with the actual central person. You're dealing with a representative. And it's not to diminish the value of a representative who has possibly earned that spot. But that's what I'm saying. You are still going to be jumping some hoops to get to establish the connection that for older people in the olden days it was easier. And I guess it also doesn't help that there's supposed to be many more of us now living in the planet, more than at any other time in history. How can you even go about realistically doing that? Let's say that we all shifted to having an organic mentality and we all wanted to establish this relationship with someone directly. Let's say that all of us living in town decided to start going to the farmers market. Can they handle a crowd like ours now that we live in these urban areas? And I don't know. I think that I want to eat and I want to have a relationship with food to where I'm not overeating, but I'm also not under eating. But I don't want to overeat on something that I psychologically think is good for me. Therefore, I can overdo it. But I also don't want to undereat, because my options, especially based on my financial status, are I can buy a lot of cheap things, whether the cheap thing is good for me, but it's not as good for me as the organic that I cannot afford as much of, because the cheaper stuff is supposed to be less nutrient dense. It puts me at a higher risk of ingesting things that are known carcinogenics. Organics are not a guarantee that you won't get something like cancer, but at least it reduces the chances that you'll expose yourself to something like that. Conventional, it's trying to make it sound like it's guaranteed that because you'll be eating too much pesticide, it's going to mess you up. It's research proven that it'll mess up with your hormones and things like that. I think that this can help people make better choices, but if you inherently had a care for people and their well-being in the long run and on a big scale, why wouldn't everything be inherently organic? And if we have to buy a little bit less and teach our big families to perhaps dial back on how much they eat and making sure that you don't waste food, I think that is the sacrifice we're willing to make. But I also think that the consumer is way too spoiled now by the fact that every time you go to a store, it's a semi-guarantee that your item is going to be there. Now, if you were to create a sense of scarcity, maybe people would be a little bit more responsible with how they consume things, and you will actually buy only what you need. And if something goes bad on you, after 2 weeks, you're not going to try to come back with your receipt to be like, this went bad on me, get a refund for it. You have to experience the loss so that you can become a more responsible consumer, hopefully. But here, we're not trying to make the consumer a responsible person. We're trying to spoil them to get them to be more loyal to us, more loyal to our brand, so that we can create more profit. You can have the organic label all that you want, but I think that psychologically, our society still needs help to become better consumers and better members of society, kinder people. If we're going to be healthier assholes, see what I mean? I sincerely don't know, you guys. I eat whatever I can get my hands into. I prefer certain organic items that I have experienced a guaranteed superior outcome with. For instance, cooking with herbs that are organic. To me, organic cilantro tastes better and looks better than conventional. Conventional tends to look a little limper And I know that cilantro is a limp herb anyway, but I feel like organic always looks more colorful, like a deeper green, and I feel like it's got a stronger aroma than its conventional counterpart. And I can say that apples, I don't really eat them that often, but I feel like apples to me used to be super gross when I was a kid, but now I can eat them a little better. And spinach, 100%, I'll never forget. In 2012, I was eating spinach for the first time, and I bought the whatever brand Walmart had. It was called Market Side, Marketplace, something like that. Anyway, it had like a black label on it, and I bought that spinach, and I absolutely could not eat that bitch ass spinach. It was the nastiest green I had ever eaten in my life. Some 2 to 3 years later, I tried an organic version of spinach, and I could have spinach day in and day out. So, is there a difference in taste? I feel like I can be certain that there is, but when it comes to claiming the superiority of food, I think it's something that as a society we need to get better with, because to me this feels classist. My ability to access good food, and by extension good healthcare, and by extension education, it shouldn't be something that keeps me ruined financially for the rest of my life. So if I have to leave a shorter span, but at least I'll be more peaceful because I'm not horribly indebted, then that's fine. I'm not going to be buying the new phone. I'm not going to be buying the fanciest food. I'm not going to be going to the doctor every time I feel a little bit of pain. It is what it is. I think that as consumers, we should be encouraged to feel good about our choices, and especially acknowledge the fact that you're trying. Even if you cannot afford organic veggies and organic products in general, you're trying. And that is still something commendable. And the reason I say that is because, have you guys noticed the loads of trash that now carries the organic label just very casually? Organic fucking cheese puffs, organic Doritos, organic things that shouldn't be organic, like macaroni and cheese. Is that something that should be organic? See what I mean? This crap food, things that we associate as crap food. Now I feel like the organic label doesn't really have as much power anymore. I think it's still important now more than ever, but I feel like because it can be slapped on anything, you can tell that there's a lot of lobbying going on by these big companies that are bullying the federal government into submission, and now things that used to be better preserved, now it can be easily deployed onto anything. Junk food, I think, is something that, because it's so heavily processed that it doesn't exist in nature, like where's the Cheetos tree, right? I think items like that don't deserve to carry the organic label. I think the organic label should be reserved to say, you just killed the chicken, was it raised with organic practices? Okay, boom, organic. That swordfish that you kill, was it roaming around organically? Okay, you can get the organic label. This apple, did you grow it without, the crazy pesticides and the soil health and all that shit? And perhaps the workers could be taken into account too. Okay, boom, organic. But to label a pie as organic, to me, it sounds like an FOS tactic. I'm just saying. That's my opinion as a thinker, someone who only allows for so many things to manipulate me into submission. But when it comes to food, I have my reservations. That's all I'm gonna say. All in all, the presence of the organic label on foods that are junk foods feels misleading, because organic took off as this is healthy for you, this is better for you, but junk food now can carry the label. I think the organic label should be for wholesome food, such as meats, cheeses, veggies, fruits, grains, and that's about it. Not heavily processed food. Well, there you guys have it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know your opinion on this one, because this can be a topic that's kind of divisive. It's just one of those things that, I don't know. I cannot claim superiority on a subject that, despite me hearing about it and being aware of it for about 13 years now, I still cannot sit here and tell you straight off the top of my head what the process incurs and how it works. I sincerely cannot. I just recognize a lot of deception and manipulation out there, and I just know that I'm not willing to be indebted just to have like a eating status. It is what it is. All right, that's it. Bye.